I've been joking with my friends that I want to start a campaign called "Stop Building Shit," and no, seriously, like there's just so much. There's always changes to build, to take action to build stuff, especially when it comes to infrastructure. And all of the systems are set up to prioritize building intangible results. And it's very easy to say, like, we need to do this, we need to act, we need to be building stuff to protect. And the models with which we, as government planning bodies, engineers, designers, make decisions about what to build and what not to build are all rooted in economic models where you have to be able to quantify the value that's created when you build something. And so it's very easy, or it's relatively easy to say, if I build this highway, I'll generate X million dollars over the next 30 years or 50 years. It's very hard to talk about social factors and to say, we've invested in democratic decision-making processes, or we've invested in more equitable decision-making processes. And so what ends up happening over and over again is hundreds of millions, tens of billions of dollars go to different cities and regions, and all the money goes to what's seen as part of the structure. And so when I say stop building shit, I mean that it is also what I fear. You all shared that quote about Latoya saying, what we do in the next 5 years will inform the citizen. What I fear working on water issues here in this region is that we'll look back in 50 years and say, what did we do? We can spend 20 billion, we can spend 50 billion, and we cannot change anything fundamental about how we got into the situation in the first place, how we end up in a city half which is below sea level, how we end up in a city where we spend over $50 million a year pumping stormwater, and that is the number one cause of subsidence that Thomas talked about in the Northwest region. And so I'm just going to draw on the situation of roads in this city to try to illustrate what I mean by that. And so some of the categories I wanted to talk about in terms of, and so the thing to keep in mind is that we are spending tons of money. We got $2 billion off third application done from FEMA to rebuild roads, so that's still underway. Project management issues aside, that's one thing. What I'm talking about here is design plans. We received $141 million from HUD for the Gentilly Resilience District. Much of that goes to roadway programs in Gentilly. And then we have another probably $150 million for hazard mitigation projects on Chile. You may have heard of Paving the Feet. So that's building great gardens and bump outs and different things like that. And then there are also people like Angela Chalk, Healthy Community Services, people who are doing amazing grassroots work to change how streets function. At the end of the day, though, the FEMA funds go to rebuilding streets as they were. And I don't think anyone is making a map and quantifying this. I'm looking at Joe, maybe Kelsey, you guys could help with this. If we talk, every single project starts with the premise that every resilience project starts with the premise that it's going to help reduce the amount of stormwater runoff and therefore subsidence, the load on the pump station, so on and so forth. I have a sinking feeling that we quantify all the hard work to build green infrastructure, and then we compare that to all of the work that's gone into just rebuilding. I live in Central City every single day, and you lot of concrete and asphalt is being re-poured, or once green strips are being covered over with concrete. Nobody's actually stepping back and saying, have we actually reduced the amount of total impermeability in the city? Have we actually changed fundamental runoff characteristics? Nobody's asking that question for Matt. And I would bet if you put more into core concrete than we have into planting trees, because a lot of the green infrastructure efforts that are actually completed are done by grassroots organizations and nonprofits, relative to the billions that are being spent on pouring asphalt and concrete. So material-wise, what have we really changed? We still build utilities in the same way. And then at the city planning scale, what has really changed? Have we addressed in thinking about roadways? Have we thought about the footprint question? Where should we be building roads? We still have roads going out to the footprint of a city that was built out, drained, and developed for a population of over 600,000 people. We're still below 400,000 people. But we haven't made any decisions about what the footprint of the city should be. And so we're still presuming that this footprint needs to be what it is. We've built our levee systems for that. We've built our roadways for that. We've built all our utilities. And there are very direct consequences in St. Bernard Parish. Maybe you heard about the braiding amoeba. If you have pipes and you have stuff that it is more than you can maintain, things fall apart. Water was sitting stagnant in St. Bernard Parish pipes, and braiding amoeba were able to grow, and somebody died. And so St. Bernard Parish had to install automatic flushers to keep the water, because there's not enough people flushing their toilets in St. Bernard Parish, right? So you look at all the roads and the dumping in the roads in New East or in the areas of the city that haven't been rebuilt. And so there's a very basic question about what should the footprint of the city be? What is the ideal population of the city? That isn't being questioned despite the billions of dollars of investment. Our car dependency, our relationship to highways, our dependency on highways as evacuation routes, none of that is being challenged. Yes, there's work on bike lanes. Yes, there's work on complete streets, but the fundamental relationship that we have to cars and how that relates to housing, work, that isn't being challenged. And then culturally, we use the word resilience a lot. I bet if we ask each person in this room what resilience means, we'd get pretty different answers. And we haven't had it's not like we have a collective, deeper shared narrative of what forms of resilience we're building towards. And that is guiding policy and grassroots action, top down and bottom up. Flooding, to me, that's one of this word flooding. We live in a delta city that's created by the flow of water. If half the city is below sea level when it rains, there's going to be water in the streets. And so the very basic premise that when it rains, there should be water in the streets, that's something, it's not for me to say like that is or isn't flooding or you should believe this or that. But collectively, have we shifted? Have we actually engaged this question of what does it mean to flood in this environment? Because as soon as you call it flooding, and the general media coverage, policy, and elected official coverage of what flooding is that it's negative, it's bad, it's something you're trying to do away with, which is what Sturgeon Water has been tasked with doing for over 100 years. And that's how we ended up with a city that's below sea level, because we're pumping that water out. And so that map that Harry showed, where we have all the reds and the yellows and the greens of land that's sinking away, and the flood risk from a future storm, that map shows New Orleans and Metairie as being white. That's not reality. I'm not saying it's a bad map, but what I'm saying is that is predicated on massive expenditures of money and fossil fuels to pretend that that line is not below sea level. So today, sunny all day, hasn't rained, a single drop. There have been pumps cycling on and off throughout the entire day to keep this bowl from filling up with water, because so much of the city is below sea level. So if we're doing all this, if we're building, we're spending tens of hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in tranches of funding, some of which are termed resilience, but we're not questioning or in moving forward collectively as to what resilience looks like, what sustainability looks like, what the causes of science are. Do we collectively have an idea about how we want to fight subsidence? And then culturally, like, what is the neutral ground? All these things really should be questioned, but it is much easier politically, and also, like, just as a person to not have to always be answering those questions. So I think it's very easy to kick that can down the road over and over again, and to just focus on we're investing X billion, we're investing X billion. So what I would say is, how do we start to ask that question of what have we actually accomplished with that X billion? And to not just take the word that, like, if we say we've invested 10 billion in resilience or this or that actually has fundamentally changed anything about the city, anything about the region. I worked on the urban water plant, which had various 10 years ago, from 2011 to 2013. If miraculously $6 billion appeared out of the blue to implement the entire urban water plant, which is about green infrastructure and climate adaptation, we would still flood from a storm. So because that plan itself doesn't challenge the basic premises of where we live, how we live, what our expectations are when it rains in a Delta city. And so I think, like, when I say stop building stuff, it's also a way of deferring the harder conversations. It's really hard. If $1 billion had come in today, I think 10 years ago, I would have been all in on like, oh, we need to spend some portfolio streets, parks, and evacuation is structural, non-structural. We could spend all day trying to find the perfect formula, how to rationally spend that billion. But I truly believe we spent that billion on actually figuring out how do we collectively make those really hard decisions and not just perpetuating the status quo. The really hard decision about footprints, the really hard decision about what flooding, what the role, what the presence of water should be. It's a cultural question. It's an economic question. It's very much a political question. But we continually default to using an economic lens to figure out what we're going to do. And we end up just continually avoiding asking really hard questions. And so I think because of that, I can look back on the last 10 years where there's been so much fraught around green infrastructure, living with water. And I don't believe we've really shifted much. There's projects to point to. But when half the city is below sea level, we're actually encouraging people to invest in areas that are below sea level. What are we actually doing? And that question has to be asked because it has to do with this human life and safety and property and all the things that we purport to care about.
Right. It's